All right. They say you can tell a whole lot about a man by the size of his motorcycle, right? So, speaking of compensation, let's talk about Adolf Hitler, because apparently history's most infamous dictator had more than just a personality problem and more than just height to make up to. Joining us to discuss this further is Dr. Julian Kavanaugh, Assistant Professor of Neurology at the Emory University School of Medicine. Dr. Kavanaugh, what a pleasure to have you back on. Well, I know we're not here to spend the entire segment on Hitler's shortcomings, but there is a medical story here, right?
Yeah. Yeah, so there's this fascinating work of several geneticists, and a documentary is started being shown on Channel 4 in the UK, which I was able to see, which is a very high quality scientific vulgarization that proves a few things. Let's go through it very quickly. First, the rumor that Hitler had Jewish heritage is debunked. So genetic spoke, and that's that.
All right.
Second, he probably had a genetic disease called Kallmann syndrome, which causes a delayed and incomplete sexual development by tinkering with the cascade of hormone that go through the brain and the sexual system for development of sexual characteristics and fertility. And the third thing, which is a little bit more controversial, he seemed to have several genetic markers that are found in populations that have a little bit higher rate of bipolar, schizophrenia, and ADHD. So that's not a proxy for diagnosis, but it's interesting to see those markers because they're fairly high pronounced in his genetic makeup.
So we're talking about a very real medical neurological condition. And if Hitler did indeed have this, could it have played a role in his megalomania, or is it armchair psychology here?
Potentially. Kallmann syndrome can cause delayed or even absent puberty, infertility, incomplete sexual development. This was a man who was very aloof, who had very tremendous difficulty tying relationship, who was very strange with others, in particular women. But at the same time, it's always very important to remember that we are much more than our genetic makeup, and that any DNA or any genetic disease or any genetic particularity, none of that is tied to evil, to crimes, to hate, and to the type of megalomania that he has developed, because our genes are always in interaction with our environment.
Right.
And the very complex nets that compose our personality, and that was this personality of his that borrowed from the worst of narcissistic, sadistic, paranoid, psychopathic psychopathology, is unique to his story and not just to his DNA.
Right. So there's no medical waiver here for his monstrous agenda. And but from a neurological standpoint, Dr. Kavanaugh, how reliable is it to diagnose someone in retrospect, especially someone like Hitler, where there is so much speculation and propaganda involved in it?
Right. So it's important to keep in mind that we have very limited footage and we have very limited medical records, and that the medical records that we have access to were the work of probably incompetent physician. His personal physician, this Dr. Morel, was described by other Nazis as a quack. That's not my words. At a time, remember, where the German academic system was in complete scientific freefall because it had been purged of the Jewish, the LGBT, and the non-Nazi aligned scientists and doctors. It's very important to remember that.
Yeah.
So we can't speculate on maybe he had Parkinson's disease, maybe he had neurologic symptoms that were caused at least indirectly by many of the drugs that he was using. He was using a lot of amphetamines and other drugs in particular. Those can cause notably changes in the brain that could have explained some of the symptoms that we see on some of the videos we have to this day. but it's very spotty and not necessarily reliable information. So we cannot necessarily infer a diagnosis. So this is why genetics is bringing an interesting angle, because it's much less reliant on historical artifacts, records. But again, we need to keep in mind that our DNA doesn't make who we are.
Yes, tiny problem, massive consequences, right? Dr. Julian Kavanaugh, Assistant Professor of Neurology at the Emory University School of Medicine, joining us live from Atlanta, Georgia. Thank you so very much, Dr. Kavanaugh, for this fascinating insight. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, then.